California outmigration is predictably straining the budget. California had the biggest exodus of population. Florida and Texas, yeah, they brought them in, didn't they? Well, what's that doing to the budget? It's not good. Things are not going in the right direction for the Golden State. Let's get into it. Here we go. Look at this guy. This guy right here, he's got not a care in the world. He's got his surfboard. He's got a wetsuit on there. He's got a dry suit. Who knows? One of those deals. California is without a doubt one of the most naturally blessed places in the world. Geographically. The idea, just like Seattle, we've got some amazing terrain and physical beauty, just like Portland. You look out your window and you're like, wow. And then you look down to the street and go, holy cow, what happened? The idea of the American dream was invented there. And during the 50s and 60s, it became the embodiment of America's opportunistic spirit. Optimistic spirit. Opportunistic. It's not the same. Its images was surfers, suburbs, and Silicon Valley. Remember that? I remember growing up here, and you always heard about California. Like everything good was happening down in California, and whatever I was doing up here in Seattle was just like second rate, right? It was just second rate. And then when I became an adult, quasi-adult in the 80s, I started seeing through real estate. I was doing appraisals of real estate. I was selling a little bit of real estate by the very early 90s. And I realized how many people were coming from California because Pacific Northwest was cheap. It's geographically fairly close to California, but it didn't have all the shenanigans that California had going on even then in the 80s. And then when Microsoft cranked up here in Redmond, one Redmond Way is that 2 miles from where I'm sitting, something like that. When they cranked up that campus, a lot of people started moving up here because Microsoft and all the other companies started poaching talent from Silicon Valley. And then all of a sudden, you've got Amazon here, you've got Starbucks, you've got Microsoft, you've got all this stuff going on. And we started to get our own tech culture here. San Francisco was one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and Los Angeles was Tinseltown, the place where dreams are made. New York City may have been the place where if you made it there, you could make it anywhere. But California was the place that you could lay in the sun in the morning, take a meeting on a patio, and eat exotic food while planning a new venture and drive your nice car to your 2,500 square foot house with a yard. Who doesn't want that, right? I mean, that sounds ideal. Year round, you got a tan. This is the best. Go to the beach. Yeah, it's not exactly 90-degree weather, but you can still sit at the beach in middle of winter, especially in like San Diego. It's not a terrible life. When you start to stack all this other stuff that we talk about here on News for Reasonable People, that beauty and opportunity starts to go sideways, doesn't it? Today, not so much. The state is still beautiful. Well, if you ignore many of its people and politics just like Seattle. And there's areas where I go that are just spectacular. But in order to get there, you're like, oh, God, this sucks. This is terrible. Ugh. How'd we get here? Oh, yeah, we allowed it to happen. We allowed situations to just, we're so compassionate. Just do whatever the F you want. This should work out fine. All right. So then we get to the U.S. Census net domestic migration by state, April 1st, 2020 to July 1st, 2023. What does that look like? I'm going to switch to this view of that so you can read it because I don't know about you, but my eyes just aren't as good as they used to be. All right. This is net domestic migration. A positive would be, all right, a lot of people left too, but they had more people entering. So Florida, number 1. Texas, not surprising. The Carolinas coming in at 3 and 4. You keep hearing about the Carolinas, right? As a place where, hey, it's a great place to retire. I keep thinking about Tennessee just because I think Tennessee's cool, right? I just want to go full redneck somewhere right in the middle of just somewhere out in the dingle somewhere, just embrace that. Like I can't do here in Seattle because obviously blue-haired weirdos, right? We got Arizona. We got Tennessee. There we go. There's Tennessee. We got Georgia, Idaho, Alabama, Oklahoma. If you would have told me 20 years ago, you know what? A lot more people are going to be moving into Oklahoma than California, I would have said, what? What do you mean? How? How's that going to work? Everybody goes to California. Yeah. Then we got Nevada, Arkansas, Utah, Montana, Maine. All right, let's start then we got the middle states. Some of those are interesting as well. Wyoming coming in at 24 with not much of a gain, but a little bit of a gain. Let's look at Cali coming in at numero 51. Oof. Yeah. They have lost one. Let's round up. I'm not going to squabble over. What is that? 200,050 people. I think that's what that number is. Is that? No, it's 2,000. Yeah. Okay. 2,050. If my math is off, you PhDs in math out there, you let me know. All right. California coming in. They lost 1.2 million people. New York, almost 900,000 people. Illinois, 364. New Jersey, 153. Massachusetts. Oh, do you see the pattern there? Michigan, minus 58. Minnesota, 45. Hawaii. How many of those are blue states? Right? How many of these over here lean a little more red, little reddish? Even if you've got some blue cities in these red states, you get where I'm going. You don't have a lot of red cities in these blue states here at the back end. So, the net migration, those are the numbers. You've got these Democrat-run states and cities where people are basically saying they are voting with their pocketbook and they're saying, no can do. I've known kids from here, and by kids, I mean kids in their late 20s, early 30s looking to start a family, and they've lived in Seattle. They just want to try Cali. Maybe they work for Google. They want to go down there to Mountain View and just, let's see what it's all about. They're back here within a year. Oftentimes, they're back here within a year. Like, yeah, you know what? We tried it and the weather was great, but the taxes were just eating us alive. The schools were not good. Things were so expensive. And I talked about, and I think about all the time, I recently went to the Seahawks game. You can check it out on my Instagram, Sean Reynolds 68, whatever it is. I put together a little video. My son, Kieran, and I, my younger son, Brennan's 28th birthday would have been December 17th, so last Sunday. And we didn't do anything for that just because it didn't feel like something to celebrate. You know what I mean? Your son's dead. It's like, oh, what are we doing here? So the next day after his birthday, after not really celebrating or just trying to figure something out to go physically do, hey, let's go to the Seahawks game. Monday Night Football, right? Pretty epic. So we decide at 4:30, it's a 5:15 game. We decide at 4:30, we're going to go to the game. All right, Karen, I'll drive from Bellevue to your house in Seattle, and then we'll take my car over to the Kingdom, I still call it, even though it's been 22 years since the Kingdom's been blown up. Maybe it's 25, I don't know. But so we go there, we pay $96.20 for parking. Paid almost $100 for parking. Granted, it's Monday Night Football and it's the Seahawks. All right. $100. Our tickets for 300 level seats, they were not great, were $120, $130, something like that. 2 tickets for under 300, right? My entire package for going to Oklahoma Thunder game, basketball, right? All right. So I know we're comparing apples to oranges. Got a lot more games than the NBA season. A few games at home, Monday Night Football for Seahawks. But my entire package in Oklahoma was $103 for 3 tickets and $10 for parking. Yeah. And they were decent seats because the arena there is not crazy huge. So, some of the expenses that I think about on the regular and everything else down in Oklahoma City was cheap. Cheap. The hotel's cheap. Rental cars are cheap. Food's cheap. Gas is cheap. Go into a drugstore, CVS. I came out of there and I told my mom, good Lord, I only spent $9 on all this stuff. What's the deal here? Go into 7-Eleven. Consistently, everything is just cheaper. But then the kicker is you got to live there. So unless you got a really good job there, you got to live there. Not a lot of physical beauty. It's flat, right? You got just suburb after suburb after suburb, and you got retail shopping center after retail shopping center. They just build in these concentric cities. Whereas in California, you've got the ocean, you got mountains, you've got, moderate weather, you've got way more employment, but then you got a whole bunch of other factors that people are saying no to. We'll take the flat physical attributes of Oklahoma City. It's where my parents are. And for them, it's a great option. And you're seeing a lot of people say, I don't want to deal with the politics here in Washington State. Get me out of here. Or even younger kids who are liberal by nature are saying, you know what? I thought I wanted to live in Cali, but I really don't. Because, having to work all that extra time to come up with the state income tax, that whole thing, right? So if you would have told Americans in 1970 that Texas and Florida would be stealing citizens from California, they would have laughed. I would have laughed. I would have said, oh, right. The Carolinas? Come on. Tennessee? Ha! Literally, right? But there it is. California has lost 1.2 million people in only 3 years. 3 years. Florida gained 818. We went through that. Texas, 650. Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it? Well, a lot of us would have thunk it when we start looking around and going, yeah, I don't want to deal with their shenanigans. I don't want to deal with that nonsense. Geographically, yeah, it looks good. Seattle looks good. But then, you got to start dealing with some of the crazy stuff that goes on there and the crazy politics. Let's just engage in socialism and we'll see how this goes. In a capitalistic society, this should work out fine. We'll just tax the F out of everybody and they won't go anywhere. They'll just keep bending over and taking it. And that's just what they'll do. Oh, Amazon's not doing headquarters too here? Oh, they're leaving? Yeah. Who would have thought, right? It's been years since California started bleeding people. But as the Los Angeles Times notes, that wasn't a problem because they were poor and the rich wanted to live there. So bad. City and state officials want a better class of citizens, so they mistreat their poorer ones and lure the wealthy, whom they describe as the creative class. You're very creative. And $1 million in your bank account doesn't hurt either, right? Raise taxes, give amenities, and cater to their virtue signaling. That's the thing that drives me the craziest about living in Washington and being close to Seattle is the virtue signaling. Everybody's just so virtuous. It's like, you guys are just full of crap. Look at how that's all working out. You guys are literally just full of crap. It's the only way that I can really talk about it. Even though California has experienced lopsided outmigration for decades, the financial blow has been cushioned by the kinds of people moving into the state. Same thing here with Seattle. Washington has an outmigration issue, right? It's not a lot, but it's some. But we keep bringing all these wealthy folks in because of the employment opportunities here within the tech sector. The newcomers were generally better educated and earned more money than those who left. So you had the right kind of people coming in and your expendables going out, right? The reversal, largely in response to the state's high taxes and soaring cost of living, has begun to damage California's overall economy. And by cutting into tax revenues, has delivered punishing blows to state and local governments. State budget analysts recently projected a record $68 billion deficit. That's what we're talking about, right? And literally, I had a headline the other day is, we got a $68 billion deficit in California. And somebody made the comment, Sean, they may not know what a deficit is. Like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Maybe I should explain it to him at the beginning of the podcast. By the way, here's what a deficit is. So some of you have just been out there living in Never Never Land thinking, government will just pay for it. Well, that's your hard-earned taxpayers at work or not at work being utilized to cover your expenses. That's no longer going to be a thing. In the next fiscal year, because of a 25% drop in personal income tax collection in 2023, some city, country, and other local taxing authorities, particularly in the San Francisco Bay Area, have also recorded revenue declines. Got massive, massive issues with your city, your local, your county, your state budgets. Yeah. It's kind of like one of my earlier podcasts today was Texas is now flying the illegal immigrants that Chicago so dearly wanted at one point. They just wanted them so bad because that virtue signaling thing. They just bring them all to us. And then they realized, oh, there is something called a budget and a deficit. And they were running a big deficit. And moving forward, if they kept accepting all these folks being bussed up by Greg Abbott of Texas, things weren't going to go well for their budget. Oh, yeah, no, not so much. So they started going after the buses. We've talked about this. Started going after the buses and the bus drivers. Now we're going to impound your bus for bringing those people in illegally. It's like, okay, so Greg Abbott starts flying people in. All right, just drop them off. Yeah, bring her back plane. We'll just rinse, repeat. We'll keep doing it. He's just spreading the love around, right? I mean, just giving love to all of these sanctuary cities that have just been begging for it, but they're not begging anymore. California, the same deal. You got a budget. Yeah, it's kind of bust. All right, let's just see how it goes. So the only thing you can do in a situation California is in when you've got a big deficit like that is cut services or more taxes. Taxes are already incredibly high. You're going to see more people leave. And that is, inherently kind of California's doom loop, right? Areas where things are already wildly expensive, you can't afford to jack them up because people are already on the verge of leaving. Whereas, the taxes that I see folks paying down in Oklahoma, they got some expensive property taxes because that's how so much of their economy and everything works, right? Off of property taxes, all their budgets. So they got that, but they don't have, I don't believe they have a state income tax, and the state sales tax is, I think it's 8%, 9%. But even after you pay that with the cost of goods, because everything's so cheap, because, I don't know, Midwest, Southwest, however you want to consider Oklahoma City. I think they're like the southern portion of the Midwest, but they're the northern portion of the Southwest. So I don't know what you even call it. One of the most amusing things that I hear liberals say is that the blue regions pay most of the taxes, so they deserve more of a say in how things should be run. I'd say they just have more mismanagement. I don't know. This always struck me as a bizarre argument from the compassionate left, although it has the virtue of being how they honestly think. Listen to us, peasants. We put military bases in your states, so do as we say. It's a lot of money flowing into your states. You should listen to us. The formula works for a while, but it doesn't work forever, as with many such schemes. Now, even rich people are leaving California because it turns out that government amenities are not worth the cost, and all that virtue signaling can add up to some big bucks if the middle class is replaced by the poor. So, that's literally, article goes on to kind of talk about some of the same things, and it expounds on that. But one of the biggest things was during the pandemic, when the idea of, hey, we're all going to work remotely from home forever and just go live wherever the F you want, that on top of super low interest rates. Now, interest rates have come back down a little bit. Call it a point from 7.8 down to maybe 6.8 where we sit right now. And they're going to go lower. Some people are even saying they're going to go into the high 4s sometime in later 2024. I think if we get something with the 5 in front of it, I think that's a great number. We're at 8 right now, 6.9%, which historically is an incredibly low mortgage rate. But we've just come off of 2.75, 3%. I remember seeing the stats for people with mortgages under 4%, XYZ% of the population has a mortgage under 4 and definitely has a mortgage, and some of them under 3. So you compare those to where we sit now, there's good reason why people are like, all right, I'm going to get out of California while the getting's good. And they did in droves. And celebrities. We haven't even gotten into, all right, people are wanting to leave their communities because they're so overrun. Tents, drugs, garbage, and you don't have the civic services to provide what you once did because you're running a negative deficit. You're running a budget deficit. And so again, cut services, increase taxes. Those are your only two options. Create more revenue for the city. It's got to come from somewhere. So as you have more and more people leave, you got less and less tax dollars coming in. How's that going to work long term? Not well. How's Texas and Florida doing? How's the Carolinas doing? How's Oklahoma doing? Pretty good. Thanks. Right? I mean, this is not that tricky to figure out. So the geographic beauty, just like Seattle here, aside, put that aside, get down to brass tacks. Does this city, does this state make sense? That is starting to come in, and it's been coming into focus at a much greater level, to the point where you're seeing memes on like Instagram. You're seeing people say, I know there's one gal that I watched. She goes, my name's whatever, and I'm a recovering Californian, and she lives somewhere. I think she lives in Tennessee or somewhere. And she just talks about all the unique things to the South. And she's just like marveling at everything because it's so wildly different than California. You know, pretty funny stuff. But you got a lot of that going on out there because people are recognizing, yeah, the physical beauty and the expense and the quality of life, cost of living are not offsetting what, people used to say, it's okay. You'll accept that because, these other areas, there's just not a lot going on. Well, there is. And people are gravitating towards those areas. In California, how long is the bleed going to go on in California? Probably a while, right? I don't see this getting better overnight. And so getting back to the celebrities, how many celebrities pulled out of LA at the beginning of the pandemic because they saw how the homeless encampments after the CDC said, don't sweep them because you might spread the Rona around. We don't really know. In fairness, we didn't really know, but it ended up being kind of like the flu, right? And getting the vaccine, it didn't necessarily mean you didn't get it. Whole different deal there, right? You used to not even be able to say that. You would get dinged for saying that. Yeah, I mean, that's not the truth. That's not how this game goes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But we're past that now. Hopefully we're past any immediate pandemics. Plandemic. Oh, is that a word? Yeah. Don't know. California, though. I think it's going to be on the struggle bus for a while. Yeah, I do. Washington State. Now, if we get an income tax here, struggle bus. Because again, it won't be enough to offset all this craziness going on. And, those are some of the big ticket items. Other items you've got is, the way that rental properties are being dealt with, just give all the rights to the tenants, none to the landlords. So people can't even manage their own assets anymore. You're not seeing it happen down in Florida. You're not seeing that happen down in Texas. That's just not how things are going. So will this pan out in favor of the red states? It already is. It already is. The numbers don't lie. You can't get around those numbers. All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. I will catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.